Good morning, everyone. It's Mary, and it's time for another episode of the Monday Morning Leadership Bite. Last week, I had an interesting week in which I had to deal with a conflict that occurred a couple of weeks prior that is still sort of playing itself out. And I thought, so today I'll talk about how managers and leaders deal with conflict. So conflict is inevitable. I don't care if you consider yourself a leader or soon-to-be leader or want-to-be leader, a reluctant leader, whatever you are, as people, as we gather together, there are going to be situations because of the differences of opinions, the diversity within the team, the backgrounds of the team, and this overall stress level that is going to be the right playing ground for conflict to occur. And as a leader, you can count on dealing with it at some point in time, if not major, maybe even in minor ways. And I see leaders deal with conflict in a couple different ways, and there's about 4 ways that you can deal with conflicts, and there's no right or wrong. I think that has to do with your own leadership style. The first is to ignore it, and I'm going to say also second to that would be to avoid it. And there's a difference between ignoring and avoiding. There's a choice that we're making at some point in time that we see there's a conflict going by, and let's say it's amongst your kids. Your kids are having a fight, and you're going to purposely ignore it because you know that the way kids are, the way your particular kids are, they will eventually get to the point where they'll resolve that conflict on their own. Avoidance says that I don't even want to deal with it, right? So you're walking away and you're saying, I want no part of that. I don't want to get pulled into that argument or that discussion or that conflict. So one way is to ignore it, one way is to avoid it. And I want to make a distinction between it because there's 2 different types of styles. One's a little bit more active in the ignoring part of it. Next is to be passive about it. So a third way to deal with it is a very passive way. And when I say passive is that we recognize that there is a conflict. We don't want to deal with that conflict, but we don't know what to do about it, but we figure we need to do something. So we will drop hints or make innuendos or suggestions, but we're not really attacking it head on. And then lastly, the 4th way to deal with conflict is direct. I tend to be a more direct person when it comes to that. There are different models for dealing with conflict, and this leadership bite is not to replace that. I think if you Google conflict resolution, you would get tons of different advice and opinions. They were all kind of say some of the similar things. There's definitely courses you can take, and so these are just some tips that I want to provide. And when it comes to dealing with conflicts, when it comes to dealing with conflict, I would say number 1, and I say this in other leadership bites, and that is as a leader, your own self-awareness of your own style. So knowing that I prefer a more direct approach to conflict because I want to get to the other side of conflict, which is the problem resolution aspect of it. I don't like conflict, so I try to go through it really quickly. So I need to be aware of that, and I have to understand that not everyone is like that. So having that sense of self-awareness allows a leader to say, I know what my style is. Not everyone is going to be similar to my style, and therefore what do I need to do to maybe stop and pause for a second. 2, you want to respect the differences in opinion. That the reason why conflict exists oftentimes is because the individuals involved see the problem or the situation very differently. There's an opinion A and there's an opinion B, and each person is trying to win the other person onto their argument. And so when we talk about dealing with conflict, you need to make sure that as you, the leader, if you're in the conflict or you're asked to step in to mediate, that you respect the opinions of others. There's no one that is wrong. There's no one that is right. An opinion is just that. It is just a perspective and a perception about how they see a certain situation. So we need to acknowledge it and to accept it. Number 3, what is the tension? Especially in today's political environment, there are times when we can, because of our own shortcomings about the situation, or we feel about something a certain way, that we argue a point and we're not arguing the reason that we got into the disagreement in the first place. We start to spiral out of control or go down rabbit holes. And so it's important that as a leader, you go back to what is the real tension? What are we really talking about? And then number 4 would be to separate the emotions from the disagreement. And so being able to say that while I may feel insecure about the situation, I may not feel as if I am contributing or that maybe you belittled me, or maybe you made me feel as if that I didn't have a voice in this. I need to separate that from the disagreement. So I can get to number 5, which is the facts. What are the facts? I find people argue, and they're not arguing facts, they're arguing opinions. And so if I tell you that my opinion is my coffee cup is the best coffee cup that you could ever have when it comes to drinking coffee, because it allows the heat to distribute a certain way, you could argue with me because you may have your own special coffee cup. But what you can't argue is that this coffee cup is green, because we have enough social and scientific proof that says that this is a shade of green, and we don't argue that. So what are the true facts about what we're in disagreement on? And that will allow us to then go to number 6, which is understanding the big picture. At the end of the day, I don't think we wake up going, oh, I can't wait to get in a conflict with someone. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people out there that look to pick fights. But then why? Why are they picking fights? That's kind of my mode of thinking, is to get to the why and to understand the big picture. Because I think that if we can get beyond that, remove the emotions, understand what the tension is, and understand the big picture, that at the end of the day, we all want a better life for ourselves. We all want the best for our families. We all want for us to feel safe and our families to feel safe. We all want the country to prosper. We all want to prosper ourselves within our jobs. We all want growth and opportunity. We all want, insert want here. I can go on. But at the end of the day, what is the big picture? And if we can give everyone, if we can elevate to a certain point where we're all like, you know what, we're all here, but we're carrying different maps on how to get there, and that's okay, and that's awesome. It allows us to move to step number 7, or tip number 7, which would be to explore the options together. Then now that we understand what we're all striving for, we all just want to do really well at our jobs. We all just really want this family to prosper. We all just want this community to grow. Well, how do we go about that? And if we're sitting in a room and having those types of conversations, while I may have opinion A and I may have opinion B, there could be an option C that we can get to really quickly. And we're not going to get there if we're arguing over A and B, but instead looking for the opportunities that they exist outside of our own opinions and looking outside of the conflict that currently exists. When you see the opportunity in conflict, then you realize that not all conflict is bad. That sometimes, in order to have a healthy, constructive team, a highly functioning team, we have to be able to have conflicts, because that's the only way we're going to grow. That conflict is a healthy enabler for growth. It is not necessarily meant to be the demise of a team. The conflict is okay, but when we see the conflict as a negative and we avoid it, or we're avoiding it because we just don't want to deal with it, then conflict can fester and it can actually affect the team in a very negative way. So instead, as leaders, here's your challenge today. If you find yourself this week in a conflict, see if there's an opportunity for you to step back, remove yourself from the situation, take out the emotions, understand where you're coming from on this, look at the big picture, look at the facts, and see if there's a way around it, if there is an option C, if there is a middle ground that you can take, and you can find a healthy way that all individuals grow out of that conflict. Hey, I thank you for watching this week's Monday Morning Leadership Bite. Have a great and awesome week.